Hysterical.
Cool.
White privilege. What does this term mean to you?
I guess for me, white privilege is, I define it as an unearned rights that are based on being identified as a white person in a society. I guess these privileges can range from my ability to hail a taxi to the health care that my mother received when she was pregnant with me. And white privilege means you're allowed to make mistakes. I guess when you come into contact with law enforcement, for me that was the first big example. I was driving on the west side of Chicago in a predominantly black neighborhood with my boyfriend at the time, who was a black man. We got pulled over for what later I was told by the cop was a rolling through the stop sign. But as I was driving, I saw the lights behind me. It wasn't a normal cop car. It was a undercover cop car. I pulled over. 3 undercover cops got out of their car, pulled both me and my boyfriend out of the car, completely searched the car, and patted him down. But as I was questioning him, because I was very angry and nervous, he started to also get nervous because I was questioning him for legitimate reasons. And as they were thoroughly patting him down, they were joking with me about Major League Baseball. And I think that was probably, later reflecting on that, was like a huge eye-opening experience to the way white privilege works.
What about you, Bailey? What does it mean to you?
Well, all of the things that Emily said, I completely agree with. I grew up in California, and where, yeah, some of the stereotypes are true about, we are taught more about equality rather than segregation in schools in California. And while there, don't get me wrong, there's a ton of discrimination issues that are still in place, but I think I'm really confident in saying that we're 10 years beyond, places that maybe in the Midwest or even here or in the southern part of the United States. At home, I wasn't taught about skin color. I grew up in a very multiracial and multicultural family. So when a classmate ran up to me at the drinking fountain in the 4th grade to tell me that my cousin was racist, my immediate instinct was just to stand up for her. It was only then that I went home and questioned my mom about what that meant, and then the history of the oppression and the racism and all of the issues in my family came out that I had never been aware of before. My best friend in elementary school was black, and is black. Her mom was a single mom. My parents were never home, so we kind of bounced back and forth from each other's houses. We were on a track system in elementary school where you go to school for 3 months and you're off for a month. And it happened to be one of those months where we were off. And the coolest things to do back then were to walk to Taco Bell that just opened up and go to the convenience store. And one of the biggest moments where I realized that I was maybe more privileged because of the color of my skin was we went to Taco Bell, and on a sunny afternoon, then we went to go get ices at the convenience store. And I was getting my icy, and she was looking at candy, and the clerk came up to her, and A, told her, "I've been watching you guys walk around the neighborhood." B, asked her why she wasn't in school, and C said, "Are you going to pay for that?" I put my icy down, ran to her, grabbed her hand, and ran out. And she looked at me and told me that she was extremely mortified by my behavior, and we walked 100 feet away from each other in silence the rest of the way home. And that was a big turning point for my thinking about skin color.
You had obviously some reactions when you recognized that people were actually disadvantaged because of the color of their skin. What are some of your initial reactions when you begin to recognize that this was very pervasive in society? That it was not just this individual issue, it was very systemic, it was going on in many different places. How do you react to that?
I think that as a child you notice your surroundings very in a different kind of way. Learning about slavery, I remember going home and crying, and then after that day, trying to learn everything I could and trying to notice things that were still going on, learning about the civil rights movement, noticing that was, when my parents were my age, knowing that these things were still very relevant into my life, into the fact that I lived in a small town that was predominantly white, and me questioning that. I think my freshman year of college, when I learned the term white privilege, it kind of was monumental for me, because I could, all these things that I'd seen throughout my life were connected and made sense to what I wanted to do to make the world look differently, to make it better than it is right now.
Well, what about your first encounters, Billy? Those very early encounters and your early reactions to white privilege?
Well, this term, white privilege, I never heard it in this specific context until I came to S.I.T, to be honest. Not in high school. Never were those two words put together, even though the things I was learning and seeing were, now I can look back and see that is what has been going on. And now I've used the term to pinpoint where I have been privileged based on the color of my skin, and also to own the color of my skin. My father's an immigrant from Latin America, my stepfather's Jewish, my stepmom is Asian American, the person I consider my brother is black, and all along I've been white. I have now used this term to grow into my awareness to the extent where I'm nearly hyper-aware of it. And if I look back on all the times that we were stared at on the street, I was treated better, or the times I've stood up for them in their presence, I get super overwhelmed about this. And all along, I've been blaming the systems in place and others for treating them differently because of the color of their skin. When now I can look at my presence alone, being there, was reinforcing the system, and I was being treated better, and they had to face the reality that they were then being treated worse. Had I not been there, maybe that wouldn't have been an issue. And it really never occurred to me to think of it in that perspective until now, and yeah, being guilty doesn't really adequately measure how I feel about it, but I know that that's only a fragment of the negative oppression that my loved ones and other people with different skin colors have been carrying their entire lives and have to continue carrying. So I'm not the victim, and I've had to admit to actually being the perpetrator in some instances since coming out of S.I.T.
I think Bailey gives a perfect example of how white privilege works, that we don't have to notice it. It's something that when you do, it's a responsibility.
So you don't have to notice it. Why do you say you don't have to notice it?
Because as a white person, the way you're accepted, treated in society, the next day you can ignore how others are treated because you don't have to think about it because it's not you, it's not your family, or in Bailey's case it was, so it's different.
That almost speaks to the notion sometimes when a white person does something that seems out of character, people say treat it as though it's an individual issue. When a person of color does something, they will say things like, that's how they behave. And they put it as though as a group categorization. That when white people do things, they treat it more as an individual. You're doing that because you are just not normal. So there seems to be a norm around how white people behave, which is a superior norm. And how black people behave, or people of color, very often the norm is more on a derogative type of end. So it's interesting that you make that connection. But you talked something just now about your responsibility. You keep saying that I know that I'm white and I'm benefiting from this white when I'm in the presence of people of color. What responsibility do you think you have to work with this to ensure that you use your privilege in ways that can benefit people of color as well?
I've just been increasingly conscious of the fact that I need to ask people how they want me to behave as an ally. I was not conscious of this in the past. If you say something mean to something, or something offensive to someone I love, or someone I'm around, or one of my friends, I'm going to react. And now the internal battle is dealing with, I get to react because I'm white. That's a privilege. And had the roles been reversed in any of those situations, I'm realizing and reflecting now that the outcome could be much more detrimental. Recently, my dad went up to a guy at an amusement park who said something offensive to my sister and I when we walked out of the bathroom. And I begged him not to because I was embarrassed, but at the same time, I was proud that he was being an ally to females and being overprotective as my father. He went over really quickly, said something. The guy screamed, "Learn English, you stupid chink lover." And we all just pretended not to hear it. We were at an amusement park. I was with my family, and there's children around, and no one said anything. But my instinct was to react, but I couldn't. What if we all reacted? Detriments of that could be huge, based on a racial thing that's an ignorant white man said to us, to my dad. That guy, I have to feel sorry for that guy because he has to wake up every day being like that. And just being conscious of when I have that internal desire, I need to ask how I could be the best ally.
I see it's definitely a huge responsibility that I think I try to hold 24/7, but mainly is to be an ally with people of color in the ways they want me to be, and especially in settings where I'm around all white folks, where there's times where people think it's okay to say things that they would definitely not say in front of a person of color, and those are the times I think that it's most important for white folks to stand.
Have you had a situation where someone says something in the presence of you about a person of color? Can you make an example of something that has happened, has been said, and how you dealt with it?
I think a general example would be a joke, and I react in, why would you make a joke like that? And then, depending on their answer, come back with, would you say that in front of, another friend of ours, or would you say that in front of a person of color? I try to start with questions instead of attacking, because a lot of people shut down when you attack, but I definitely try to question the motives or the ideas behind why someone would even say something like that. I just also like to translate from the individual to institutionalized racism and how this is perpetrated in our media, in our education, which usually is a good way to explain to people, because it's a very easy way to debunk the statement they made.
And maybe you want to add to that? Is something you want to add?
I've been in many situations like that, and it sadly with a lot of family members about people of other races, and my step-grandmother said something like that about, we were at dinner and she was talking about a friend's daughter and said, "Oh, and she's marrying a guy, he's black," whispered, "he's black," and I was just like, my mom looked at me. My mom goes, when you say things like that, people might think you're racist. And she just stopped. I've taken on that as something that I've try to do when that kind of thing comes up from now on, in different ways, not saying racist per se, but bringing it back to judgment on them.
How do you respond if someone said to you that you were racist? How does that feel?
Has anyone ever called you racist?
No, but I think
Yeah.
that if someone did, I would feel very defensive and hurt and immediately try to come back with something. But as a white person in this racist society, it's impossible to escape the pervasiveness of racism.
Dealing with this issue of white privilege and dealing with race, what are the challenges you have in trying to see if you can actually bring about an understanding that we benefit from our white privilege? What's the biggest challenge you have?
I think, I don't know if I kind of stated this earlier, but for white folks, white privilege means that we can forget about it tomorrow. And that is where the challenge and the responsibility lies. I take it very serious, the responsibility.
It does, it's sort of taking it seriously, because there may be some people you may be around who may not take it seriously. I don't know if people tell you that maybe you are a nigger lover because you stand up for people of color. Do you have that kind of challenge to you?
I've had that term used before, but I think that those are not the people that I'm trying to change their minds. It's a privilege for white folks to be passionate about it.
Well, that's happened to me before, how it must feel to be the person of color in that situation.
What's happening to you now as you think about that? It's something that you're connecting to, it seems to me.
Particular incidents in New Orleans when my brother and his cousin, who was like 6'5", were walking down Bourbon Street, and they're from there, and I'm not. And I was the only white person in the three of us, and I was between them. And someone said that to us as we walked by, well, me, I suppose. And I just felt, I don't want to use names, but my brother's cousin just like got super tense and just was really upset, and I just had to be like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And I just like grabbed his arm and was just like, it's gonna be fine. And then we went to a club where I was the only white person in the entire three-story club. And looking back on that, like no one gave me no one was upset at me for being there, but had it been a role reversal, how, different would that have been? They were very overprotective of me while I was there, but it wasn't like I didn't feel uncomfortable by my mere existence.
And I'm sure that very often in many places, if people of color walk into certain places, they're made to feel as though, why are you here?
Right.
In some cases, But I want to thank you for taking this opportunity to let's look at this concept of white privilege. This is our first discussion on it. I'd like to get back to you all to talk about it some more. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The two students you just watched, Emily and Bailey, are two of my students in the course I teach called Social Identity, Inclusion and Exclusion. My name is Ken Williams. I was born in Barbados, and I have been teaching this course on social identity, inclusion and exclusion for more than 8 years. I often begin this course by asking students to describe the most important elements of their social identity. And it's amazing that students of color usually begin by describing their race or ethnic background as part of their social identity. But often, white students never mention their ethnic or racial identity. When asked about this, people of color often state that they are reminded every day of the group to which they belong with regards to their race and ethnic background. Contrarily, white students often claim that they are not reminded of this in their everyday life. Take a break. Join me at this workshop on white privilege skills and tools for harmonizing relations among the races. The goals of this workshop is to strengthen capacities for white allies to become more effective at working for racial justice and harmony in work settings and in daily life. It will enable participants to become more effective in their anti-racist work through collective processes. It is for both white as well as people of color, those who are working actively currently against racist behaviors, and those who are still struggling to understand the concept of white privilege. I look forward to seeing you at the Inver Hills Community College. Thank you.